Welcome to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, DJ Marcotte and John Soroyce. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast, the one and only working class podcast. And the working class likes beer, right, John?
Craft beer.
Generally. Specifically, craft beer. I like craft beer. Do you like craft beer?
I don't mind it.
You don't partake too much, but it's good stuff, man. You know who has the best craft beer around these parts? Bandit Brewing has the best craft beer around these parts, right out of Biddeford, Maine. The rose that grew from concrete, if you will. And we're going to be there soon. And we don't have a date locked in yet, but we did head over there to their wonderful craft brewing facility over in Biddeford and talked to Tony over there, and we are going to be doing a live show at Bandit Brewing very, very soon. Late April, early May. Haven't locked down a specific date yet, but once we do, you guys will be the first to know. The easiest way to figure that news out is to check us out on our Facebook page at Armchair Fantasy Football, on Twitter at Armchair FF Pod. You can also find myself on Twitter at Armchair Kingpin or John at John2977. And, of course, you can email us at armchairfb@gmail.com. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube, and also Twitch. We'll be debuting on Twitch live from Bandit Brewing. Date to be determined, and we'll know it pretty soon. And like I said, we'll let you guys know when we get that date locked down. John, you excited about this?
I'm very excited. Just once we get the date, guys, I'm hoping you guys will spread the word like wildfire. And I'm hoping a lot of support will be there.
Yeah.
I've already kind of talked about it with people I'm working with, and I've already got I would say good amount of people that I want to go and see it. So
Yep.
I'm hoping the same from the peeps for the show, the Army.
Of course, we're local to Maine, so this is an easy hop, skip, and a jump for us. And I know a lot of our listeners are not from Maine. We go from Chicago to Texas to apparently Switzerland and all these other places in between, Germany. So for those of you that cannot see us live, hopefully one day we can visit your locations. But until then, we're excited for this live episode. I'm telling you guys, it's a great facility over there, great place, great beer. And you know, I just appreciate Tony and the folks over there for hooking up with us. Like I said, late April, early May. It will be a weekday, likely a Wednesday. So when we get the date, we'll let you know. And hopefully we'll get a little tour going, and we'll get one or two more venues locked in for the live version of the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. And definitely show up. I want to hear your voices. I want to hear your hooting and hollering and
Questions, anything.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. So I'm gonna try to get some bumper stickers, all kinds of cool swag. So we'll see you then. But before we get into today's episode, part 2 of top 20 running backs, let's get into the news.
Okay, we'll start off with the news that just hit a few minutes ago. Eli Manning is set to announce his retirement on Friday.
No surprise here for me. I think Eli definitely. I thought we might have seen a little bit from him when Daniel Jones was hurt and he went out there. I'm like, maybe Eli's got a little bit more in the tank and he's ready to show people he's not quite done yet. And in fact, he showed the opposite. I don't look at Eli Manning as a Hall of Fame quarterback necessarily. His numbers, I don't think, reflect that type of a career. But even if he doesn't get into the Hall of Fame, and there's a chance that he does, he's the guy that went in as a severe underdog twice and took down Tom Brady and Bill Belichick when the teams that he led had no business doing that when you matched up talent for talent. Specifically, that year that New England went undefeated, and it was just like the ultimate underdog Rocky Balboa story in the David Tyree knockout punch. And I remember they had some tiny little cornerback covering Plaxico Burress in that game, and he just caught an easy touchdown. Just almost like fate-like performances, where maybe the hand of God came down and helped those guys out a little bit. But that will be Eli's legacy, I would say. Wouldn't you agree with that, John?
I would agree with that. And then, he didn't have an awful career. He didn't have like a stellar like his brother either.
Yeah.
I just think that I think he wants to retire on a good note. And I mean, this season wasn't great for him. But at the same time, I don't think he wants to play backup fiddle to anybody next year. So he's not even testing his chances in free agency here. He's just retiring, I think, calling it quits. Yeah. So I don't blame him.
And why not? I mean, you've had a great career, and obviously, I don't think it's getting any better than. I think he's peaked for sure, and he's like super filthy rich.
Yeah. So next bit of news: Odell Beckham had core surgery. I don't think it made any difference with how he played this year.
I'll show my nudity. I'll strip myself down here in knowledge of what core surgery is. I don't know what the heck that is.
You're like, what's the best word to use?
Is that like your abdomen?
Abdomen area, okay. The core. So basically, let's see if it makes any difference.
Well, hopefully he can get, while he's in there, maybe he can get a discount on brain surgery too, because that'll probably help him. Not the best decision maker on the planet.
Other surgery news. Julian Edelman had shoulder surgery. Don't know if it had anything to do with that vandalism, but probably not. But he had shoulder surgery this past week, and he's expected to be healthy for OTA. So that's good with this surgery. He won't be banged up as much, and he should be good to go.
That's neat.
Okay, next news. Jaguars, this isn't 100% confirmed yet, but it's looking like it's going to happen. Jaguars are set to hire Jay Gruden as offensive coordinator.
I'm intrigued by that. I know when Gruden was in Cincinnati, the offense was pretty prolific.
And for a while was in Washington, too.
Yeah, Cincinnati just, for a stretch there, had a knack of getting in the playoffs almost every year. You know, a lot of people have short memories and don't remember that. But Marv Lewis always ended up landing himself in the playoffs. And a few years, Jay Gruden was a big part of that and had a really good offense. So hopefully this is good for him. My bigger question, is it good for Leonard Fournette, which we'll talk about in a few. I don't think it can be any worse.
I think it's better. Because,
I think it's an upgrade for sure.
So wait and see. But wait till that news 100% confirmed, but it's looking that way, though. Dolphins are expected for a Ryan Fitzpatrick return in 2020. Nothing is solidified yet, but they would like to welcome him back for another season if he is going to play. But I think it's a backup plan as well, though, too.
I've heard, and maybe you mentioned this, I've heard the rumor they're the likely landing spot for Tua Tagovailoa. I'm really high on Tua, provided that he's healthy. I think he's more talented in terms of measurables than Joe Burrow is. So, again, there's no guarantee that they'll get him. This is a nice little safe guy to have on your roster that he's not going to hurt you too much, and you know you're not winning the Super Bowl next year anyway. He's a good locker room guy. You know, he's got a rapport with the receivers, so why not? To me, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, wait and see, but to me with that...
And he sells tickets. People like him.
These big names, yeah, they do help sell tickets, but...
And he's not a big name, but he's just one of those guys. Like, he did the Conor McGregor thing. Like, he dressed like Conor McGregor one time at a press conference. He's just a fun guy, and fans like him, so... He kind of helps put butts in seats, I guess.
Well, I mean, look who the backup is after that.
Who is it? I don't even know.
Rosen.
Oh, yeah. How could I forget?
He's I think Fitzmagic will stay. I mean, this is my opinion, definitely. But I think he'll stay. It's an insurance plan, and it's a great insurance plan if Tua comes because they don't have to rush him. They can let him develop or wait and see how.
Fitzpatrick, dude, like every year this guy plays his bonus money. Like he got that big deal from Buffalo, so he's just tacking on the retirement fund at this point and enjoying himself. He's got to be like, I think he's like my age. I think he's like 38 years old or something like that.
I think he was younger than that, but I could be wrong.
Maybe, but I don't think so.
Austin Hooper and Falcons under negotiations. Look like, if I had to guess, Hooper's going to get paid anywhere from $8 to $10 million if contracts go down, but they're still in early talks.
I would test free agency if I was Hooper. That's just me. The problem is, and this is probably what his agent sees, is this is actually a pretty deep tight end market this year. The Hunter Henrys of the world, the Austin Hoopers of the world, the Eric Ebrons of the world. So he might not garner as much in the open market as he would if he were a free agent last year where there was really nothing.
Nothing, yeah. Okay, last bit of news. Saints are working on re-signing Drew Brees. Shocker. I don't see him signing elsewhere. I think he's going to die a Saint. I think he retires here. So I don't see him testing free agency. I'd be very shocked if it happened, to be honest.
It's one of those things, and it's the same with Brady. He's 37, Ryan Fitzpatrick. The same with Brady. It's like, I'm excited at the idea that they could end up somewhere else, because it's like fantasy football. It's like you want to see a guy play on a different team, to see him in the uniform and see what would happen. But I just, it's so late in these guys' career to start over. I think that is going to get in their head at some, and I don't think I don't think Breeze wants to go anywhere else. But the fact that he would have to, let's say he went to, I don't know, the Dolphins. Would he really want to start over at this stage of his career if New Orleans is interested in re-signing him?
But you also got to look at from the other aspect. He may want to start over based on the fact that he holds a ton of records.
I don't think he does.
And I don't think so either. I think he just wants to do his time, and he wants to have another.
And that team's got a chip on their shoulder.
Because they make it so far. They get so close. And I know he wants to win at least one more before he retires. That would be my guess. They always kind of
get screwed over by the refs, too.
But this year wasn't the refs, though.
There was a couple. Sorry, I had to have my Aroma Joes. I haven't had it yet today, so.
They're not a sponsor.
No. Wish they were, though.
So that's it on news. So we can dive right into this.
All right, cool.
Top 1 through 10.
Well, we're in the top 10 now, John, and that top 10 is much like last year, unlike any other years prior top 10. It seems to jumble around, and guys get in and guys get out, and you have the select few that are always in the top 10, and then there's always special appearances by other guys that are probably never going to make it there again. But last year's number 1 slid all the way down to number 10, John, and that's Saquon Barkley. He had 1,003 rushing yards this season, 6 touchdowns, 52 receptions, 438 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. Let's not forget he did miss time this year. Some really interesting things that I saw from Barkley's game this year. There was definitely a decline across the board in a lot of different measurables. He was 23rd in attempts per broken tackle, which surprises me because he's a really fierce runner. But I also think that offensive line struggled a lot this year, getting him in open space. And that injury, let's not forget, and I'm going to kind of harp on that a lot as I break this down, but his yards per carry went down from 5 to 4.6. Still a good number, but we saw a decrease there. The big issue for Barkley, he had 4 receptions per game in 2019, this past season. That's compared to 5.7 in 2018. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but that's almost 2 receptions a game. So that's over 30 points in PPR, not counting, the yardage that would have been attached to those receptions. So that's a big one for me right there. And I don't know if that's going to be part of the game plan moving forward. I don't think so, but Jason Garrett's a meat and potatoes guy. So that concerns me a little bit that his reception number might be closer to this year than it was last year in 2020. Giants, I kind of pick on their O-line, but they weren't ranked terribly. They were ranked 17th overall, so they're kind of middle of the pack. But the real issue to me, John, was the injury that Barkley suffered in week 3 that cost him 3 games. But it kind of, to me, cost him more than that, because clearly it continued to be an issue well into the next several games for Barkley. He was not the same guy, and I think you started to see the real Barkley down the stretch. He averaged 31.6 PPR points per game, John, in the last 3 games of the season when he finally got truly healthy. So I think you started to see the real Barkley in those last 3 games when he really started to get truly healthy. I think he's going to return to top 3 form with no issue at all in 2020, provided that he is healthy. But the huge drop in targets per game for me is a concern, John. Barkley's yards per target were identical in 2018 and 29 with 6 yards per target, but his targets went from 7.5 to 5.6 a game in 2019. So that's a big difference to me. Do you think that target count rises with Jason Garrett there, or do you have some concern that it stays at that plateau that it was at this year?
I see an increase, but I don't see that 91 reception. Not with the emergence of Darius Slayton. I don't think anybody thought Slayton was going to come on as hot as he did.
Yeah.
Now you have also another mouth to feed. Golden Tate's there. I mean, Sterling Shepard, as long as he stays healthy, they got more options.
Ingram. Actually, I think Evan Ingram's a free agent this year, too.
He is. But I have a feeling he'll re-sign.
I think so, too. My gut says that.
He's been hurt, so I don't see him testing free agency and getting the money he would deserve, I guess is the word to use.
And he knows he has a role there.
Yeah.
It's not like O.J. Howard where he's like, this place stinks. I'm out of here.
To me, I think, like, okay, this was his worst season target and reception-wise. I can see somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to say he's going to return to his 121 target form. That's, like, phenomenal.
That's receiver targets.
Yes.
Good receiver.
That's Christian McCaffrey level.
Yeah.
Because he's done that twice.
Yeah.
I can see about 80 targets, which is slightly higher than he had this year. Maybe 85, depending on how they run the offense. But I think he's safe. He'll increase in that. It's just going to be, I think it's positive regression all the way here. And like I had talked to you during the season, remember when I said Barkley's back, but it seems like he's not playing himself.
Right, and that was for sure.
And you could see it because there was a few weeks he never had 20, got fed the attempts 20 up until the last 3 weeks, basically. But even then, he just didn't look good. I'm hoping that the Giants in free agency will get a nice offensive lineman. I don't think they need a receiver. I think they go free agency lineman, they go offensive line in the draft. This could really help them rebuild, and they got a high pick. So I think they build that line to not only help Barkley, but to help Jones as well.
Yeah, they might need a new quarterback. The jury's still out on Jones. I mean, he's so feast or famine, it's not even funny. But he did flash signs of greatness. I think with Garrett there, at least Barkley's going to get a lot of carries. You don't have to worry about the carry department. A little concerned about the receptions, but I think, like you said, I think he's going to be somewhere in between his 2019 number and his 2018 number. Maybe around 65, right around there. And that would be great. All right, moving on to number 9, Alvin Kamara, 797 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 81 receptions, which is a heck of a number. And coincidentally, he has had 81 receptions, John, every year in his career, exactly 81.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. 533 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. Obviously, touchdowns were an issue here, but number 1 in attempts per broken tackle. 81 receptions, like I said, in all 3 of his seasons was kind of interesting. Maybe he'll get 81 next year. Maybe that's baked in. Maybe it's not. Alvin Kamara was 7th overall in juke rate. He led the league in rushing attempts per broken tackle, as I said, and he was also 3rd in broken tackles. So, good year overall in terms of efficiency, John. He also ranked 7th in consistency points among running backs, which you didn't feel like it because of the touchdowns, but he was consistent, and he gave you a fair amount of double-digit performances. I mean, if you look at his numbers, John, you look at his measurables, he's still elusive. He's still an excellent pass catcher. His issue this year was his decline in touchdown production. He had 18 touchdowns in 2018 and just 6 in 2019. He had 1 touchdown for every 43 touches this season, whereas in 2018, John, he had 1 touchdown for every 16 touches. From 43 to 16, that's a huge difference. He lost 72 points, about 5 a game, just on touchdown regression. So going into next season, New Orleans has got a 5th-ranked offensive line. Add to that his receiving prowess. Add to that positive regression in the touchdown category that I can almost guarantee you will be there. Kamara could be right back in that top 5 mix next year.
He's still in the top 10. I mean, that's consistency right there.
Yeah.
I just think he also gained respect from the league, saying, hey, this kid just had 18 touchdowns last year. We know if he's in there that the ball's going to him in some aspect or another. So they caught on. But
especially if Breeze is there.
Yes. And then the other part of it, too, is they focused so much on Alvin Kamara this year. Guess who feasted because of that? Michael Thomas.
Yeah, it definitely, I think, helped Michael Thomas and Jared Cook. I think kind of was a benefit. He benefited from that as well. Yeah, but I love Kamara, man. I've always liked him a lot. I've tried and tried and tried and tried to get him on my keeper team to pair him with Zeke Elliott, and it's just I can never get him out of the clutches of Phil, who has him in that league. But I'm a big fan of Alvin Kamara, and I think next year you're going to see him much higher than number 9. And he could end up number 1. You never know. He's that type of guy, much like Christian McCaffrey, where he's going to run the ball and he's going to catch passes. So his upside is higher than most guys in the league. So I could definitely see him as the RB1 at the end of the year next year.
Okay.
Nick Chubb settles right in at number 8, 1,494 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. 36 receptions for 278 yards, 0 receiving touchdowns. For a good portion of the season, John, Chubb led the league in rushing. He had the second fastest play of the year, 21.95 miles per hour this kid ran for players with 20 more carries, I should say. So it's a very specific stat, but I say 20 or more carries because you want to kind of get the relevant guys in there. There's guys that do kick returns that are fast, but you know what I mean? You want to kind of attach it to guys that actually get usage. So 21.95 miles per hour, which, like I said, was the second fastest play for running backs with 20 or more carries, which is pretty impressive. He ranked number 2 in evaded tackles. He ranked number 1 in breakaway runs. He had 17 breakaway runs, which is more than 1 a game. And basically a breakaway run is a run that's 15 yards or more. He ranked 2nd in yards created, ranked 3rd in goal line carries. Just a really good year for Nick Chubb. He averaged 18.9 PPR points per game before Kareem Hunt, though. So I want to rewind the clock, and you and I had this discussion before the season. You didn't think Hunt was going to affect him all that much. I didn't think he was going to affect him significantly, but I thought he was going to affect him. And the split was 18.9 PPR points per game before Kareem Hunt came back. And after Kareem Hunt, John, 12.9 PPR points per game. So Kareem Hunt definitely affected Chubb's value. That's a pretty big drop there, 18.9 to 12.9. Nevertheless, Chubb is a huge part of the offense. But right now, it's a huge part of a bad offense. Hopefully a new coaching staff improves this highly talented offense. If Mayfield can reach his potential, and possibly if Hunt moves on to another team, Chubb's upside is limitless. But it's very situational for him. It's almost like when you say, oh, this team has to lose and this team has to tie for this team to get in the playoffs. It's kind of one of those deals. But at least his baseline's pretty good. I think his baseline is top 10.
I mean, you look at his numbers; they're identical. The measurables and all that, yards per attempt are. I mean, you're talking about a guy averaging 5 yards an attempt. But you also remember it was a rookie year in 2018. 2019, his yards per attempt slightly went down, but his usage was through the roof.
Yeah.
He had almost 300 attempts rushing. But you look at his, and I know everybody says Philip Lindsay, PPR back. Nick Chubb, if Kareem Hunt goes away, Nick Chubb actually could be a PPR back.
36 receptions isn't terrible.
No, but that's also with Kareem Hunt in the mix. So you take Kareem completely out of this mix, does he have a chance for 50 targets? So there's more cream to add to this if he goes away.
I think the most important thing here, John, is everything we expected of Sony Michel we're seeing in Nick Chubb. The evaded tackles, the breakaway runs, the yards created, the goal line carries. Like, all that stuff are really important stats. And those aren't luck stats. Those aren't, he was in the right situation stats. He's a really good player stats. And it's important to make sure, it's great if a guy's on a team that runs all the time. Look at Blunt that year. He got a bunch of goal line carries. I'd rather have the guy that's really good, though. Nick Chubb's both of those things.
Blunt was just opportunity that year. He had 22 touchdowns, and he just got the goal line carry every time. But
you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
Chubb is the total package.
Exactly.
So little Lex Luger reference there. Number 7, Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette is a very polarizing guy, John. Some people love him. Some people hate him. Some people think he's going to be a bust. Others that actually have him know that he's not really a guy that has a ton of bust potential. He's actually got a pretty good safe floor. But he's never really fun to own, I guess. But with Leonard Fournette this past year, 1,152 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. That's a problem. 3 touchdowns is not good. But 76 receptions for 502 receiving yards and 0 receiving touchdowns. So 3 total touchdowns. But other than that, his numbers were really, really good. He faced 8 men in the box 31% of the time, John. 31.7% of the time he faced a stacked box, and he still gave you these numbers. So he's got to get a little bit of credit for that. He ranked 29th in yards per contact, before contact rather. So his offensive line wasn't giving him a ton of space, but it was better than a lot of his peers. So it wasn't terrible. Their offensive line does though rank 26 in offensive line rankings, which means they're not very good overall. His yards before contact, add it to that, he still achieved 4.3 yards per carry. That's a career high for him. So he was pretty efficient on the ground this year. He ranked 8th in consistency rankings, so he's a pretty efficient in your fantasy box score as well. He only had one game, John, all year with single-digit PPR points. Does that surprise you?
No.
It doesn't? I think it surprises a lot of people.
I don't think so, because based on the fact, well, I remember at the beginning of the year, because you asked my take on Leonard Fournette, and everything I was reading was that he was going to see the targets this year, and if you look at his targets, even from his rookie year, which was only 13 games, and then 2018 was 8 because of injury, he basically doubled his targets from his rookie year in only 13 games. He played 15 games this year, and he had 100 targets. He had 26 the year before. Yeah. So his targets quadrupled from last year.
Yeah, they did. He ranked 7th, actually, among running backs in target share, so team target share.
His targets, if he got the touchdowns like he has in the past, even at, like, you know what I'm saying, like the 5, the 6, let's say his floor from before, he would have finished even higher. But his targets alone, not targets, receptions, targets, his passing game is what got him in the
You're right.
in the top 10.
You're right. The touchdowns were a huge issue for Fournette. Just 3 overall touchdowns, like I said. In 2017, he had a touchdown for every 30 touches, John. In 2018, a touchdown for every 25 touches. In 2019, a touchdown for every 113 touches. He only had 8 carries inside the 5-yard line all season long. Think about that. Bottom line, bad coach, bad offense, bad offensive line. Can all that be fixed in one off season? I think it can be improved. We talked about Gruden being the new offensive coordinator. I think you could see Fournette, I would be happy to own him. He's a big part of the offense. They can't get any worse from the offensive line standpoint, from the coaching standpoint. So I think he's a guy to get after in 2020, especially if his touchdown numbers go up and his receiving numbers stay the same. Then you're looking at a big year for Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, I agree.
So for next year, would you draft Leonard Fournette over a Nick Chubb? Would you draft him over a Joe Mixon? Would you draft him over a Dalvin Cook?
Not over Dalvin Cook. Right. Leonard Fournette.
Would you draft him over Derrick Henry?
Yes.
I would too. I would, and we'll talk about Henry in a little bit here, but I like Fournette a lot, and I think he's one of the underappreciated talents out there.
He is, and then the other part of it, people got to look at is if they improve this offensive line, even if it's a couple, the efficiency will go up. Not just for Fournette, but look at Gruden, what he's done with pass running backs. Alfred Morris had monster years with Gruden. Adrian Peterson had some respectable years with Gruden. Yeah. Honestly, his floor, even with Gruden, his floor is 1,000 yards rushing. I can honestly, if I have to put a number on what he gets next year, I say between 12 and 1,400 yards rushing. That's just rushing. That's how much I think. Yes,
I think that's.
And I think his passing game, I don't think he sees 100 targets. I can see 70 to 80 targets. Maybe that could slightly go down.
And the other thing that we're really not factoring in here is he was healthy all year. He was motivated all year. He was focused all year. Everything he said he was going to fix, he fixed.
The talks before were Leonard Fournette is not a catching back. No, he can catch the ball. You just got to throw it to him. Yeah. It's kind of like Ezekiel Elliott. Every time we said, just throw him the ball because he can catch.
Right.
And he can run in open space. And he proved it this year with 100 targets.
Yeah.
So
he's like the Sanka version of Zeke. He's not as talented, but
he's good.
Right.
But I think, you might see some regression in his targets, but I don't think a lot. I think they're still going to keep him the focal point if they're smart here, which I believe Gruden will do, and work the other pieces around him into it. And I think he still gets, like I said, 65 to 80 targets here. It goes slightly lower there, but I think his rushing yards will go up. Same with his rushing touchdowns. That's what I'm predicting.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you there. All right, so we'll move on to number 6, Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was on pace, John, at the beginning of the year. He looked like he was going to end up the RB1 on the season until Christian McCaffrey just basically said, hold my beer, and then just completely destroyed everybody. But still a respectable season for Dalvin Cook. 1,135 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns on the ground, 53 receptions, 519 receiving yards and 0 touchdowns. Let's not forget, Cook did miss a couple of games. He was also 4th among running backs in consistency rankings. You guys know that's one of my big favorite stats. I want to know when I start a guy that I'm getting double digits with the upside of 30, 40 points out of him. And that's what Dalvin Cook gives you. He had 15 carries inside the 5-yard line, and that resulted in 9 touchdowns. So that made him number 3 overall, John, in goal line carries. Gotta love that as a fantasy owner. He was number 4 in evaded tackles, number 8 in breakaway runs, 5th in yards created, 8th in catch rate. So Dalvin Cook didn't do a lot wrong this year, except he got hurt again. Cook's injuries, missed time are always a concern, and you almost feel like it's baked in when you draft Dalvin Cook. But if he had played 60 games, John, he would have been on pace to be the RB2 overall behind McCaffrey. You got to love Dalvin Cook.
He's fantastic. I mean, he started off, like you said, the first 5 games, he rocked it sideways.
He was Christian McCaffrey. He was they weren't throwing the ball to anybody.
I'm not saying that Cook just dipped completely after these games. I mean, he was still efficient, was still good. But can you imagine if Adam Thielen was healthy, Stephon Diggs was more consistent, it would have helped Cook in the long run.
But those two things are never going to happen. Diggs and Thielen might be good together at the same time for a game or two, but the Cousins just isn't good enough for that. He's not. We've seen it over and over and over again. Diggs is just... Don't get me started on how wasted Stephon Diggs is on that team and that offense. But because of that, it makes Dalvin Cook that much more valuable in a fantasy perspective. And as long as Kirk Cousins is there, John, I would expect the same exact usage from Dalvin Cook. I mean, Alexander Madison's a good backup, but he's not going to get a 50-50 split going on.
No.
That's not happening. Cook's getting the lion's share of that work.
I think he'll have some regression as it relates to rushing touchdowns. This is a huge total, 13
1 13, that's good.
I can see...
That's really good.
It's really good. I can see a floor of like 8. The rushing yards could probably stay the same, but where I see there is going to be positive regression, I think, is the receiving game. I think 63 targets doesn't even crack what he can do with the ball more. And I don't know if that's the way this offense is tailored. I don't think it is. I just think that they're going to start to realize that in order to win more games and be... I'm not saying they were bad this year, but to be better on the offense, they need to get Cook involved more. And there was some games he not disappeared. Like, he didn't get, like, any targets compared to, like, the middle and the beginning of the season. Yeah. Like, the last 5 games of the season, 4 targets, 2 targets, 3 targets. I mean, just dips down, like, in a space in between. They won a couple of those games. I get when it's a blowout, it's going to be different, but...
Gone are the days. Ask Ron Rivera, who's was out of a job. Ask Ron Rivera, who got fired. Ask Aaron Rodgers, who's sitting at the house right now. Ask Kirk Cousins. You cannot win championships with one-dimensional offenses anymore. You cannot just run the ball effectively and win a championship. It will not happen anymore in today's NFL. But I don't think Minnesota's smart enough to figure that out. And again, as long as Cousins is there, I think Cook's going to be
What blows me away is his career yards per reception. 8.8 for a running back. That's pretty high.
Good. That's pretty good.
And this was a career high, 9.8. Last year was 7.6. His rookie year was 8.2.
Yeah, no.
So that tells me he's very effective in open space. Yeah. But that's if they improve and get him involved more in the passing game, I'm telling you, he'll crack top 3 if they can do that. But it's a big what if.
All right, we'll see if that happens. Before we get on to the rest of the list here, I just want to take a moment to mention our GoFundMe page at www.gofundme.com/armchair-fantasy-football-podcast. If you guys could support us by making a donation, then sharing it with your network, we would greatly appreciate it. We know that money can be tight, so if you like what we're doing, please know that even $5 helps us get closer to our goal. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll be happy to answer them. Help the Working Class Podcast continue to provide great content and help the blue collar baller dream stay alive, more importantly than all of that. Right, John?
Correct.
So we sincerely appreciate it if you can just share GoFundMe page, post in tweets, even if you can't help us out monetarily. Share the stuff. We appreciate that too. And help support the Working Class Podcast and the Blue Collar Ballers. Because remember, we don't get paychecks for this, guys. And this does cost money to produce, believe it or not. So anyway, with all that being said, let's move on to number 5. Your boy, John, your favorite running back of all time, one Mr. Derrick Henry. 1,540 rushing yards. That's pretty good. You know what's even better than that? 16 rushing touchdowns. He only had 18 receptions for 206 yards, John, but he had 2 receiving touchdowns. So you look at Leonard Fournette with all those receptions, he got 0 receiving touchdowns. This guy catches 18 balls and gets 2 touchdowns. But anyway, he's the only running back to average over 100 yards per game, John, with 102.7. Not one other running back in the NFL this year averaged more than 100 yards per game.
That's incredible.
That is very incredible. One of only 2 running backs with over 300 carries, which is pretty surprising too, because there's a fair amount of workhorse backs out there these days. He ranked 3rd in first downs, so he's moving the chains. 5th among running backs consistency rankings, so he's consistent. He ranked number 2 in standard scoring. So while he's 5th here, he was right behind McCaffrey in standard scoring. He had that good of a year, John. And he saw a stacked box 35% of the time. The 5th most in the NFL, and he still produced these numbers. I don't know if there's going to be a P test that's going to be missed soon. I don't know what happened to Derrick Henry this year, but he completely exploded. But my issue with Henry, John, he's been a bust for the vast majority of his career until the last 4 games of 2018, basically.
And remember, 2018 was 2 games. He exploded for almost 450
It was like
yards.
the last 4 games, but he had 2 really big ones.
So, my take on Henry, I think he figured it out, but I don't know if...
So did he figure it out, or did Tennessee figure it out?
Both.
Okay.
I think Tennessee figured, hey, if we get this guy the ball and we feed him, he can actually make usage of what he's running. You know what I'm saying? Like, so here's the thing. Titans had a good line when Derrick Henry got there. The next year, they still had the same line for the most part. They actually went and got more linemen. They actually have a really good line there.
They have a great line.
Yes. So my thing is, it's a mixture of him running behind a great line and him also figuring out, like we say, some rookies don't pop their first year. Obviously, he didn't pop because he only started 2 games his rookie year.
Yeah.
And he was what's the word I want to use? Eased in.
Okay. I think that's
yeah.
a fair way to put it.
And then he just didn't figure out. He was like a bust in 2017. 2018 should have looked better. But if you start looking at his yards per attempt, they're high.
They are. I can break that down for you. So it's funny you said eased in, because this year he actually gained momentum as the season went on. In the first 8 games, John, he averaged 14.1 PPR points per game. In the last 7 games, he averaged 25.9 PPR points per game. Like we said, maybe Tennessee figured it out. The problem here for me is his track record speaks otherwise. Like, you know me, I like to look at documented history. And documented history is that Henry's been a bust. Again, maybe it all got figured out this year. This year he had 18 touchdowns and 5.1 yards per carry. His career average prior to that, 4.5 yards per carry against that 5.1, and 7 touchdowns annually against that 18. That's huge progression or positive regression or whatever you want to call it. That's so big that it's an outlier. He was, excuse me, sorry guys. I get a little choked up there talking about Derrick Henry. The thing with Henry though, dude, like 4th-year breakouts are unusual. I'm not saying that Henry's going to fall off the map in 2020. What I am saying is I'm not likely to own him given his projected ADP. I don't think he's going to repeat this in 2019. And I'd rather have a Leonard Fournette, a Dalvin Cook, a guy like that over Derrick Henry because I trust them more because I've seen them do it year in and year out.
He doesn't see the target share, and the sad part is I would love to see him have the target share in this backfield because when he catches the ball, his career yards per reception are 10.1, double digits.
You got to give the guy credit, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
but that's
10.1's an elite number for a running
It
back.
is, but he doesn't get his highest targets were this year, 24.
Yeah.
18 receptions, guys. If he even cracked 40, it would change him significantly. But I don't see it happening.
No.
I mean, like you said, stats, history, you look at it all, he will never get more than, I think, 30 targets total. Maybe even less than that in receptions, 20 if you're lucky.
He's still young, though. If we forget. He feels like he's been around forever, but he's only been in the league 4 years.
I know. It does feel like 6
Doesn't
or
it
7
feel like
years.
he's like
yes.
a 28, 29-year-old
I
running
think
back?
the year I had him, I felt like 2
probably
years.
aged both of you guys, yeah. But no, I mean, I love Derrick Henry. It's a great story. He's going to go way earlier than I'm willing to spend on him. And when I'm looking at that group of guys, I'm going to see 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 guys that I'd rather have than Derrick Henry. So somebody else is going to own Derrick Henry next year, not me. Are you bought back in based on where his ADP is?
Not where his
Because I'm guessing he'll be at the end of the first round. That's what I'm guessing. Not the first round. The end.
Based
the
on
beginning.
his-
Sorry, the end of the second round. Maybe that second, third turn. Maybe. That's what I'm guessing. But it could be higher than that. He could be early second round.
To me, he's a one-dimensional back with upside.
Right.
I'd rather have a two-dimensional back with upside.
So if you're in standard, then you're interested.
Yes,
yeah.
but if I'm in PPR, I'm not interested.
Pass, yeah. Speaking of pass, Austin Eckler catches a fair amount of those. He came in at number 4. He had 557 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns, 92 receptions on 993 yards, and 8 touchdowns. If you took away the rushing, he's probably a top 20 receiver in the NFL right there. So, and the other thing with Eckler is Melvin Gordon played with him through a good portion of the season. He had a great year. He was 3rd among running backs in consistency rankings. He saw a stacked box only 10% of the time, which is great because that gave him more opportunity. 8th in breakaway percentage, which again is runs with 15 or more yards. He was 2nd worst for TLOS, which is basically the time a ball carrier spends behind the line before crossing the line of scrimmage. For me, like the bad news, the really bad news is that he averaged 25.8 points per game during Gordon's holdout. He was out of control. But then after Gordon came back, he averaged 16.3 PPR points per game, which is a great average. But there's a big disparity right there. The good news is Gordon isn't likely to return to LA. The bad news is you don't often see repeat top 10 performances from running backs who have a generally low rushing output, which he did. Again, I look at Eckler as a situational guy. If Eckler, who is a restricted free agent this year, so he's probably not going anywhere, if he gets a workhorse role on that team, I think the sky's the limit. But in my opinion, even if Gordon goes, I think either Justin Jackson earns more carries or they add an asset in the running game because I don't think they feel that he's durable enough to get that role. But he did have it in the first 4 or 5 games, so we'll see. But I don't think Eckler's back in the top 10.
Well, Phillip Rivers being gone could change his team as well. I mean, it's Hunter Henry possibly gone. I mean, Eckler could actually... Okay, let's say Phillip Rivers departs free agency, signs elsewhere. Gordon signs elsewhere. Hunter Henry signs elsewhere. Eckler's usage is going to be huge. Even with another back possibly coming there, my guess is if I had I think a team like this needs a Kareem Hunt. It would hurt Eckler, but Eckler, though, I remember you...
Let me... I'm going to cut you off
Go
here.
ahead.
Let me ask you a question, though. You talked about Phillip Rivers. The Chargers pick 6th in the draft. What if they get Tua? It's a possibility. And Tua's healthy. That's great for Austin Eckler.
Fantastic for
My
Eckler.
only concern is I don't think they're going to give him the full workhorse role.
I think it's going to be a timeshare, like you said, Jackson and him 50-50. And I think it'll be the hot hand, but the thing that just pops off with Eckler is I can't see him doing another 108 targets, but it's we just talked about a second ago. It's a yards per reception out of the backfield. His career average is 10.6. He's averaged 10 every year. So another guy who gets into open space with the ball, he's dangerous. And he did this, yes, it was on double his targets from the year before. He had 53 the year before, 108 this year. But his average is over 10 again.
Yeah.
So, to me...
He'll be an asset.
Oh, yes.
I just don't think a top 10. I don't see that happening.
Depends on who...
You seem like you think that might be a possibility.
It's possible, depending who the quarterback is there.
Yeah.
Jordan Love, possibly.
Yeah.
Here's a guy being compared to Mahomes. Those are big shoes to fill.
Yeah, definitely.
So, wait and see. But that's a whole different episode, though.
Mahomes is being compared to Deshaun Kaiser when he came out, so, who knows.
They were wrong about him.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to number 3, my man, Ezekiel Elliott, 1,357 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns, 54 receptions, 420 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Great stat line. Again, people always seem to think Zeke had a bad year this year. That really wasn't the case. That was, as they call it, fake news. He was number 1 among running backs in consistency ranking, John, with just 1 game with single-digit PPR points. I had Zeke this year, and I have him virtually every year based on our Keeper League, but he could sleepwalk his way to 18 PPR points for you. Like, you would be watching the game, it's like, man, this isn't going well. And then you look at the end of the game, and he's like, oh, wow, he got you 18 points. Sweet. So Zeke's really consistent. That's what that means. He led the league in first downs. No shock there. They probably would have won more games if they gave him the ball more. He was third among running backs in target share, so he was still getting targeted in the passing game, but his receptions did go down. He was running behind the number 4 offensive line, and that's probably going to stay the same. They'll probably always be in the top 5 or so, so that's always a safe bet for Zeke. The big issue for Zeke, John, as I alluded to, was the drop in targets. He had 71 this season and 95 in 2018, and of course the drop in receptions that caused, 54 receptions this season, 77 in 2018. At the end of the day, the bottom line, and all those other cliches, Elliott has been locked in as a top 3 running back virtually his whole career. There's no reason to expect that to change, especially with Jason Garrett gone. I think another thing that capped Elliott a little bit is the fact that the team was playing from behind, John. It felt like every single game because they were led by the absolute worst head coach in sports history, Jason Garrett. That has changed. I think the outlook's pretty good for Zeke. Top 3 again next year.
He's always top 3. I mean, other than that year, the whole, allegations, suspension.
And I think it's just a matter of time before he's number 1. It feels like it's his destiny.
If you go by yards per game, this was his worst year. 84.8. That was his worst year. And you said elite is 100. He was just missed, it was 109 almost on his rookie year. 98.3 and...
Well, 100's a super elite. Only 2 guys did it this year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But this guy's done almost 100 every year. He just missed it.
Yeah.
He did 101 year, just missed this in 2017 on a short year. 2018 was 95, almost 96, I would say. This was his worst year. But I think it's because we know what kind of talent Zeke is, but still, 3rd overall. Can you imagine, if we're saying Garrett hurt him, imagine what McCarthy may do to him.
That's what I'm thinking, man.
It's scary. It's
and McCarthy's
really scary.
not afraid to run the ball.
And
he's kind of, again, reassessed what he does on offense and what he does as a head coach. So it's not going to be the same old McCarthy either, but I guess the reason I like that is because he used to just let Rodgers throw on the goal line every single time. So I like the outlook for Zeke this year. He definitely has a good chance of getting number 1 overall fantasy running back next year in 2020.
The only thing I want to see out of him is the consistency of targets. It's because this is a perfect example. Start looking at games, and I get they're playing from behind on some of these, and some they weren't. So, like week 1, they play the Giants. He gets 2 targets.
Yeah. Well, that's again. I think you attach that to Garrett.
Yeah,
Garrett's a dummy.
So instead of seeing 2,
good luck, Giants.
So here's a perfect example of Zeke's target stat line or stats here: 2, 2, 3, 7, 3, 6, 7, 0, 3, 3. I would just like to see 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6.
Oh no,
more
of
consistency.
Course. And that was the issue this year: is his numbers in the receiving game went down, targets and receptions. But I think you could see that again. I think 65, like we talked about before. with another player. 65 is probably where I would expect to see him. I think Barkley will be in that range as well, as we said. All right. Number 2, John. It's been a while since we heard this. He's not playing in the playoffs anymore. Playoffs. But Mr. Jones had such a good year, John. He earned his own music. Really good year for Aaron Jones this year, and he was kind of the Christian McCaffrey of the Green Bay Packers. He was a huge part of that offense, maybe too big of a part of that offense. 1,084 yards rushing, 16 touchdowns, 49 receptions, 474 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. Number 2 among running backs in target share, 4th in evaded tackles, 9th in consistency rankings among running backs, which sounds okay, but it's not that great when you're the number two running back. Yeah, so some opportunities there. He was 8th in juke rate, but 28th in breakaway percentage, so he didn't have a ton of breakaway runs. You know, I look at it, it was the touchdowns this year that really rose the tide for Aaron Jones. But a third of those touchdowns, John, came in just 2 games. So it's a little deceiving when you look at the total numbers and you actually break it down. And you cannot not talk about Green Bay's wide receivers. Green Bay's number 1 wide receiver, John, missed 4 games, and that was Davante Adams. Their number 2 wide receiver had 35 receptions and 477 yards. So that allowed Jones to get a big part of that receiving pie. I got to imagine there will almost certainly be changes at that position, especially given Green Bay's embarrassing exit from the playoffs. Aaron Jones is the epitome of boom or bust. And there's some major signs, John, that his touchdown count's going to regress. I'm going to actually go as far as to say I'm going to give a personal guarantee of that. And you also can't just look at the player's numbers. You have to look at the situation. And clearly, Aaron Jones getting a heavy workload is not going to win a Super Bowl for the Green Bay Packers. It makes them too one-dimensional. Changes are going to be made here. I think they go after it, maybe in free agency or the draft, a good solid number 2 wide receiver, a real number 2 to pair with Davante Adams. And that's going to siphon a lot of targets and opportunity, I think, from Aaron Jones. I would not be surprised to see Aaron Jones, hot take alert, out of the top 10 next year.
I don't think that's a hot take at all. I mean, 16 touchdowns, I could see his floor being 8. Maybe even 6.
Maybe even lower.
Yeah.
Maybe even lower. And Jamal Williams ain't going anywhere over there.
That's the other part I was going to bring up. Even let's say Jimmy Graham retires. Let's just throw that out there. Let's say Jimmy Graham retires. It'll open up targets still, but I think Green Bay learned MVS, Allison, Kumaro, none of them were the number 2, and that's what they're missing. And without a number 2 there, let's be honest, they always said Jordy Nelson, Davante Adams, they had depth at the receiver. Yeah. And after getting
Randall Cobb had a great year.
After getting killed by San Fran, Adams couldn't do it all himself, and they clearly saw it, that they need something other than Aaron Jones and Davante Adams to do something here.
It's not MVS.
And there's no way Jones is going to produce these numbers with a number 2 coming in. I think, and this could be a bold take, but I would not be surprised in free agency if Green Bay Packers don't go after Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
It's a big take.
I heard last year they were interested in Antonio Brown. I mean, I don't think that would hurt Davante, but again, it would definitely hurt. The more legitimate wide receiver 2 they have, the more it's going to hurt Aaron Jones's value. I think it hurts him more than anybody because you're not going to see him catch as many
Look at
passes.
Adams in the past with talent there. He still produced.
Oh, Adams will be, yeah.
Adams is fine. Adams is number 1. Rodgers loves him.
But Jones is who we're talking about, and I think Jones would definitely see some regression there. I am looking at heavy regression for Aaron Jones. All right. I got a new one, John. Are you ready? Number 1, I think we all know who number 1 is, right? You just kind of gestured toward his jersey there. Number 1 is the CNC Scoring Factory. It's actually the CMC Christian McCaffrey Scoring Factory. Yeah. And Christian McCaffrey started the party this year, and he finished it. So he is officially now the CMC Fantasy Factory, Scoring Factory, whatever you want to call it. And he was number one this year, 1,387 yards rushing, 15 rushing touchdowns, 116 receptions. You can call him the CMC Receiving Factory. You can go any way you want with this. 4 receiving touchdowns. The only way you can go is Christian McCaffrey had a peak LaDainian Tomlinson type year this year. And that's bad news. And I'll tell you why in a second. But let's talk about the good stuff. Second fastest play in the league, 21.95 miles per hour. Can you imagine if the dude runs faster than like a Geo Metro can drive? Like, this is incredible numbers that we're talking about here. And again, that's for running backs with 20 or more carries. Number one among running backs in target share. 22% target share, John, for a running back. That's outrageous. I don't know if you'll ever see another season like this ever again. It was that he was like 50 points. He was almost 100 points ahead of the next guy in line in PPR scoring. He was that good this year. 21st in the league on that target share overall. So we talk about number one among running backs. He was 21st when you include wide receivers and tight ends.
That's disgusting.
That's disgusting. 81% catch rate, which is great, but not all that surprising for a running back.
But the amount of receptions and targets he gets.
Right. He was number one in yards before contact. He led the league in yards after contact. And all of this happened with horrific quarterback play. If that position stabilizes, John, and we got a new offense, a new staff, what type of regression are we looking at? Because I think regression is going to be attached to Christian McCaffrey's name.
There is, but there's also going to be a floor with McCaffrey. We never thought he'd get another 100 receptions here. I can see him still in the 80 or 90 receptions.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, so his floor is still going to be high for receptions. His yards per attempt are high, considering the amount of targets he's getting. I mean, 8.7 this year for yards per reception, but his career is 8.3, so he's still efficient out of the game. But the biggest thing, it's not the receiving touchdowns. I think there's going to be regression. It's the rushing touchdowns. He had 15 rushing touchdowns. I can see him getting 8 to 10, not 15 again. He had to be used differently this year because they were, like you said, bad quarterback play. Kyle Allen, yes, he threw the ball.
Horrific.
Yes. Cam Newton will be the same thing because let's be honest.
If Cam's there.
If Cam's there and Cam comes back, Cam's not going to run the ball. Cam's getting older. He ain't going to run like he used to. I'm not saying he won't run at all, but he ain't going to run like he used to earlier in his career. I still think Christian McCaffrey is still going to be successful, but history does, like you said, Tomlinson didn't do this year after, but he'll still be up there.
I'm going to tell you guys, here's the thing. And again, I look at the big picture. The big picture is Christian McCaffrey was the offense. How many games did they win? 5. They won 5 games with that strategy. So guess what? That strategy's going to change, especially with a new coaching staff. The problem here is I have to believe that the new staff, number one, wants a healthy Christian McCaffrey. His usage was borderline irresponsible.
92, 93% usage, I believe.
And all that usage, John, won them 5 games. So you're going to see that dialed back. I can almost guarantee that. I can also almost guarantee, I'm not even going to almost guarantee it. When we talk on this date next year, he will not be the number one running back in PPR scoring next year. That's my personal guarantee.
I think Christian McCaffrey, the one thing that did help him that's not being said is he did gain weight in the offseason. That was one of his plans. He trained hard. He made sure that he was going to be ready this year, and I got to give him some credit. He packed on like 12 pounds of muscle.
But I'm not even talking about injury probability. I'm just talking about we ran this guy and threw to this guy almost exclusively. Our offense was all Christian McCaffrey, and we won 5 flipping games. That ain't going to work.
Well, some of that, you can't say it's all Christian McCaffrey, because the other problem of it was, too, this defense was the worst run defense in the league.
But at the end of the day, the job is to outscore the other team.
No, I get that.
And with this strategy, they weren't doing that. Now, I'm going to say Christian McCaffrey is going to be a heck of a guy to own next year. He will be an elite running back. I just don't think he's going to be number one this year. I think percentage-wise, he's going to see the most regression in the league percentage-wise than anybody else.
And I can see why. 2,400 yards from scrimmage. Right. Sorry, 2,392, which, let's turn back time here. What did I predict? 2,200 all-purpose yards?
Something like that.
Pretty darn good here. I did not think he was going to be the number one PPR. I did think he was. My goal in my head the whole time was 2,000 all-purpose, and he blew me away. I think I predicted 22, pushed it even higher, but he actually, phenomenal season. I mean, this is just unheard of.
But that's next year. That's what our thoughts are for next year. This year, we're going to celebrate this guy. We're going to continue to celebrate him. He is the CMC Fantasy Factory. For John Sorois, I'm DJ. We'll see you next week, and hopefully Zeke's number one next year, because that's my boy. But until then, let's celebrate Christian McCaffrey, Mr. Number One, and probably the best fantasy player of all time to this date. Right, John?
You're right. See you guys soon.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for supporting the show. Until next time.